to each of you joining us today for this exciting and informative webinar. We are excited to have you all here as we deep dive into one of the most crucial standards in the world of greenhouse gas reporting and sustainability. My name is Nidhi Mittal and I will be the moderator for this session, which is hosted by KBS Certification Services Limited. As many of you may know, KBS is a leading climate certification firm with a strong focus on sustainability, and we have been first Indian organization to earn DOE status from UNFCCC. We have proudly validated and verified over 2,000 projects worldwide, spanning Southeast Asia, Latin America, USA, and beyond, covering industries like renewable energy, forest, waste management, and many others. We also provide third-party inspections, energy audits, and methodology assessments to help businesses reduce their environmental impact. With accreditations from top registries like CDM, Gold Standard, and VCS, we are recognized globally for our expertise across multiple sectors. We also offer training programs to empower professionals and organizations to adopt sustainable practices and make a real difference. With a skilled team of auditors worldwide, we ensure high quality, timely service that helps our clients meet the highest sustainability standards. Today's webinar is about something equally groundbreaking, the ISO 14064 standard, a boon for reporting GHG emissions and removals. This standard is a powerful tool to help businesses accurately measure, report, and reduce their carbon footprint, which is key in driving sustainability and accountability in the global fight against climate change. During this webinar, you will gain a clear understanding of ISO 14064 and its role in GHG reporting. You will get an insight into the benefit it offers to organizations committed to sustainability. You will know what are the steps for integrating this standard into your business processes. You will understand the hidden ROI that adopting ISO 14064 can bring to your organization. Moving on, it is my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Mr. Dushyant Parashar, an expert in the field of GHG reporting and sustainability. He is a lead auditor for ISO 14064 and is also certified in ISO 14067 and 17029. His expertise has helped numerous organizations globally adopt sustainable practices. He will guide us today through the importance of ISO 14064, highlighting on how it can empower businesses to make a significant environmental impact, reduce their carbon footprint, and ultimately contribute to a more sustainable future. And for your information, this session will be recorded and the recording link will be shared with all the participants over email. We encourage you all to stay engaged and to keep your questions ready and get all your doubts cleared to make this session as interactive. Webinar duration is going to be of an hour, where first 45 minutes will be contributed for discussion, and towards the end of the presentation, we'll have a dedicated Q&A session. And without much delay, I'll now hand over the discussion to our expert, Mr. Dushyant Parashar, sir. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Nidhi. Thank you for the introduction. And good evening, all. Myself, Dushyant Parashar. I have done bachelor's in civil engineering, master's in environmental engineering. I have started my professional career from the academics as assistant professor, then moved to the environment consultancy field, where I worked on EIA's due diligence reports, decarbonization reports as consultant. And present, I am working as a GHG auditor in climate change division of KBS Certification Services Limited. Also, I have earned the certifications in ISO 14064-1-2-3 as lead auditor and a certification in ISO 14067 and 17029. While working as a consultant, I have prepared GHG report along with the GHG inventory sheet as per the ISO 14064-1 and has handholded the industries in implementing GHG data quality management system and to work on setting the roadmap to achieve the targets committed by them. Now, as auditor, I have been auditing the GHG reports, and the inventory sheets as per ISO 14064-3. Let me brief you the agenda of the today's webinar. We'll be covering these following points in the webinar. We'll starting with the ISO 14064 as it is for all, how this standard is for all, benefiting to all, and then we will move on to what is the connection between the GHGs, greenhouse gases, and the climate change. What is the drivers of the GHG reporting worldwide? How the ISO, what led to the development of the ISO 14064? What are the intended uses of GHG reporting? And then we'll move on to the ISO 14064, the critical features given in the ISO 14064-1-2 that makes it an upend standard to report the GHG emissions and the removals from the project and the organization levels. Lastly, we'll cover what are the benefits if you report it through the ISO 14064. ISO 14064 is a standard that is made for all management professionals. Companies' top management can use the knowledge of ISO 14064 that will help them on impacting the decision making, as emission reporting is what investors are demanding, customers are expecting, shareholders are relying on, and employees are valuing. Also, it is the knowledge of ISO 14004 is beneficial for the industrial professionals who are either part of the environment management team or contributing in the preparation of the emission inventory in the industries. As mandatory reporting obligations are growing, it is necessary for these team members responsible for reporting the emission shall develop themselves the capacity of carbon accounting, and so that they can be measured accurately. Moving on to the environment consultants fields, we have a large number of ESG consultants and environment consultants who are currently working in the field, and there are many new companies who are trying to dive into this new world. This knowledge of this standard will act as a guidance for them to collect the relevant in-scope quality data and selecting the right methodology and emission factors for emission calculation. Next, moving on to the auditing companies, how this knowledge of ISO 14064 benefits the auditing companies. If the auditor is working in the QMS, EMS, and other ISOs, and they want to develop a new domain for their career or skill enhancement, they can have a knowledge of ISO 14064, and where they will get a understanding on the concept of level of assurance, materiality, baseline establishment, boundary setting, and which will help them in validating and verifying many new projects, climate change projects, and the organization GHG statements. Lastly, but not the least, it also the knowledge of ISO 14064 also enhances the skill development right at the foundation level in the academics. This will be a great help for college students and the professor. For college students, this can also add as a new career perspective. Now let's move on to the understanding of GHGs. Greenhouse gases are the components in the atmosphere that traps the heat, contributing to the greenhouse gas effect. The greenhouse gas effect is nothing new. We have been going through this reading and having knowledge of this effect right from the school. The solar radiations reaches the earth's surface. A part of it is absorbed by the earth, and a part of it is reflected back into the atmosphere. The part from which is absorbed by the earth, 70% of it is absorbed and 30% again is reheated into the atmosphere. This reheated radiations into the atmosphere is trapped by the layer of these greenhouse gases, and which results into the warming of the temperature of the earth's surface. The fact is, only the 1% of the total atmosphere is having the composition of greenhouse gases, but they have a significant impact on the energy balance. Next, what are the greenhouse gases? How they are key contributors? Like First, let's start with carbon dioxide, the main contributor of the greenhouse gas emissions. The sources is the fossil fuel combustion, power plants, vehicles, deforestation, and it accounts for at least 89% of global CO2 emissions. Methane, source is the agriculture, major source, landfill, fossil fuel extraction. Another fact is that methane accounts for 60% of the global emission. However, it is having 84 times more potential than CO2, and it lasts for over 20 years in the atmosphere. Nitrous oxide. Only the fertilizer plants and many industrial processes are the sources of the nitrous oxides. And nitrous oxide is nearly 300 times more effective at trapping the heat into the atmosphere as compared to that of CO2. So although the contribution or the percentage in the atmosphere is less, however, their contribution in the greenhouse gas effect is more. Lastly, we have fluorinated gases that can be called chlorofluorocarbons, hydrochlorocarbons, and hydrofluorocarbons. The sources of these is majorly refrigerants, aerosol sprays. These gases are very minute in nature, and the release of these gases is also very minute in the industrial processes. However, they have significant GWP, that is the global warming potential capacity, that makes them very, very dangerous from the perspective of greenhouse gas effect. Now, what is the link between the greenhouse gases and the climate change? Heat trapping and temperature rise. Whenever there is a rise in the greenhouse gas concentration in the atmosphere, this means the more heat will be trapped in the atmosphere. That will lead to the increase in the Earth's average temperature rise. Next is the global warming versus climate change. With the greenhouse gas effect, the temperature of the Earth will rise. When the temperature of the Earth will rise, the climate change phenomena like events, weather events, shifting ecosystems, rise in the sea levels will take place. Very frequently in the news, in the print medias, we are coming across the informations of the extreme weather events, more intense hurricanes, droughts, heat waves, melting of polar ice, more CO2 absorbed by oceans makes them more acidic, affecting the marine life. The core Great Barrier Reef of the Australia is hidden. The effect on that Great Barrier Reef is hidden by none. The year 2020 was one of the hottest on record, with temperatures 1.2 degree higher than the pre-industrial levels. So let's come. This was the background of the GHGs and their effect on the climate change and the global warming, which these are the terms we keep on hearing now and then when it comes to the climate change and the extreme weather activities going on the earth. Now, what was the driving force for the development of the ISO 14064? In the year 1994, the UNFCCC set the goal to stabilize the concentration of the greenhouse gas, which led to the signing of the Kyoto Protocol in 1997, where 37 industrialized countries, economies in transition, and the European Union signed the treaty. At present, there are 192 parties signed the Kyoto Protocol. Kyoto Protocol covers 6 main greenhouse gases, as we have seen in the previous slides: carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, hydrofluorocarbons, perfluorocarbons, and sulfur hexafluoride. During the first commitment of the Kyoto Protocol, the commitment was made to reduce the GHG emissions on the Earth to an average of 5% against the levels that was found in the 1990. The next commitment, that was from 2013 to 2020, the commitment was further raised to reduce the emissions by at least 18% below the 1990 levels. However, to meet these commitments, there was an urgent need for measure, monitor, and report the emissions. But unfortunately, there were no guidelines for the companies to do the same at that time. In the year 1998, WRI, World Resource Institute, and World Business Council for Sustainable Development launched GHG protocol as an NGO business partnership to establish standardized methods for GHG accounting that would address the need of globally agreed upon methodology. So this led to the foundation of GHG protocol, and it became the first protocol for the reporting of the GHG emissions. Later in the 2022, the ISO Technical Management Board observed that the government, business corporation, voluntary initiatives were using number of approaches to account for organization level and the project level GHG emissions and removals with no generally accepted validation verification protocols. In the year 2025, the ISO 14064 standards were presented at the UN and in the Montreal, Canada, and got approved. The first version of the ISO 14064 was published in the year 2006. So this was the history for the development of the ISO 14064 as a standard for reporting the GHG emissions and for validating, verifying the project's organization level or the project level emissions or removals. Now we have understand that there is a need of reporting. So what will be the intended uses of the reporting? When I say intended uses, it is the reason for why the report is being prepared, can be prepared. From customer sentiments to investors' preference to government regulation, GHG reporting is a phenomenon that today permeates and guides most of the decision making. For businesses, GHG emissions are at the center of change that they need to bring. GHG report can be used for compliance, but why? How come the need? From where the need arises for the reporting of GHG for compliance? In the year 2016, under the Paris Agreement was adopted by 196 countries in COP21. Under this agreement, it was decided to reduce the global greenhouse gas emissions to hold the temperature increase of the Earth well below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, and to pursue efforts to limit it to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. In year 2018, IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, suggested to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Greenhouse gas emissions must peak before 2025 at latest and decline by 43% by 2030. This means that there was an urgent need to reduce the emissions. So the peak must be there at 2025, and then onwards with 2030, the decline must be 43% in the emissions. With this alarming situation of the IPCC, Paris Agreement requested each country to outline and communicate their post-2020 climate actions. This was known as NDC. In order to report the NDCs, the governments must first have the detailed emission data. Therefore, governments of 196 parties who signed the Paris Agreement have begun to notice the warning and has started taking aggressive action. And the first action was to mandate the reporting. From here comes the scenario of GHG reporting under compliance. Most G20 countries have some kind of mandatory emission reporting regulations. These 20 countries, which together produce 80% of the world greenhouse gases, and are still not currently on track to meet the commitments that they have made in the Paris Agreement. With this whole scenario, I must say, with GHG reporting becoming a mandatory for business, GHG emissions consideration have become a key strategic priorities in the boardrooms of big companies. Next comes the reporting under voluntary. How the voluntary disclosure, voluntary GHG reporting helps. Why should the companies be doing the voluntary disclosures? As many of you must have from the industry backgrounds, you must be very curious why to put the efforts for reporting, doing all this exercise, what will be the benefit? So the voluntary disclosure helps company in pursuing the ESG goals, aligning with the global stability goals, sustainability goals, tracing organization or departmental performance and progress the reduction of emissions. If that says if you have already predetermined targets or some reduction initiatives by reporting, actively reporting, you can trace the organization and the performance of those initiatives. Even you can, even the companies can demonstrate commitment to environment responsibility. The reporting of GHG also boosts corporate transparency that lead to enhance the customer relation, brand value, investor attraction, public awareness, etc. The GHG reporting can also be done to meet the upstream and downstream vendor supplier. Nowadays, when the companies have been mandated by the governments in the country to disclose their GHG emissions in the sustainability reports, ESG reports, disclosures, the companies are mandating their upstream and downstream vendors to report the GHG emissions. This has also led a new dimension of GHG reporting. Next, the GHG reporting can also be used for carbon pricing concept. If a company wants to take an initiative to reduce the GHG emission, they can also put a carbon pricing inside their company to on the departmental level, which helps them to reduce the carbon emissions on the at the departmental level. Voluntary GHG reporting can also help the companies in participating in the carbon market, that is the sale and the purchase of the carbon credits. Lastly, but not the least and the most important, the GHG reporting gives you a roadmap to go for the carbon neutral products. Now we have been listening about there are several frameworks, standards, and protocols floating in the market that can be used for reporting the GHGs. So what is the difference between a standard, framework, and the protocol? Standards, these are well defined and expected to be followed closely in reporting. Like standards have some, if you are following a standard, then there have some mandatory requirements that cannot be omitted. Standards still provides framework for accounting of the GHG emissions. While framework, they are just the broad guidelines and imprecise expectation of reporting. However, the protocol, on the other hand, is a specific tool, methodology, or instructions that helps organization to measure, monitor, and report their emission in line with chosen standard or framework. So the protocol can be combined with the standard or the framework. However, the protocol is important since it is giving the tool and the methodology, like the GHG protocol, the very first protocol that was introduced in the market for reporting and the calculation of the GHG emission. Next, when we say ISO 14064, the term ISO has a heavy weight in it. It's one of the oldest non-governmental international organization and has enabled trade and cooperation between people and companies over the world since 1946. At present, the ISO has published 25,558 standards, and they have 172 members representing in the country. Also, they have 840 technical committees and subcommittees to take care of the standards development. Now, moving on to the family of the ISO 14064. First one, ISO 14064-1. This covers the development and the design of the GHG inventory for the organizations. Whenever an organization, whether cement industry, oil and gas industry, iron and steel industry, refineries, they want to disclose their GHG emissions they can use the ISO 14064-1 for the reporting. Next comes the ISO 14064-2. This is helpful in quantifying, monitoring, and reporting the emission of the projects, the climate change projects, what we call briefly. These projects are installed and implemented for reduction and removal of the carbon emissions, GHG emissions. Next comes the ISO 14067. This is standards helps in developing the carbon footprint for the product per functional unit. So it is related to the per ton of steel, per ton, per liter of crude oil, per ton of cement. If you want to give the emission reporting, then you can use ISO 14067. So from all these, you will get the GHG inventory, project reports, and the CFP study report. However, when there is a report and there need to be an assurance or certification that the report is made up to a certain standard and what the claim is made in the report is accurate and is justified and is true. So there should be a perfect assurance of the report that is called validation verification. In case the project is to be implemented and is in the design phase and is like futuristic, then it is called validation. If the project is already implemented and we are checking the emissions of the project or the removals from in the monitoring period from the project, it is called verification. So we have ISO 14064-3 that gives the guidance for the verification and validation of greenhouse gas statements. However, there are two more standards, ISO 14065 and ISO 14066. These standards are more of concern for the validation and verification bodies. In the general terms, they are called designated operating entities, DOEs. So 14065 gives the requirements that the validation verification bodies need to comply with, and the 14066 gives the competence requirements for the team members of the validation verification team. So this is a complete set of ISO 14006 family of standards. Now focusing on to the topic of the webinar, ISO 14064. This is a set of three standards, -1, -2, and -3. The -1 standard is giving the guidance for the organization level quantification and reporting. It means this will give you the requirements for the design, development, management, reporting, the organization level GHG inventory. Again, the organizational GHG inventory refers to the industries, to the companies which are doing the reporting of their GHG emissions, like oil and gas refineries, like cement industries, iron and steel industries, textile industries, and many more. Next, ISO 14064-2. This gives the guidance at the project level for quantification, monitoring, and reporting of greenhouse gas emission reductions and removal. While one talks about the emission, the -2 talks about the reduction and the removal enhancements. So whenever there is an implementation of a project like renewable energy, waste to energy, forest decarbonization project, afforestation project, agriculture project, so these projects will be preparing the report as per ISO 14064-2. The third wing of the set of standards, ISO 14064-3, gives the guidance for the validation and verification of the GHG assertion. Whenever the report is prepared for any using ISO 14064-1 or -2, it has to be validated and verified under ISO 14064-3. So there are some important advantages when you use the ISO 14064. These are the principles on which the ISO has been laid. That is, the relevance, completeness, consistency, accuracy, and transparency. These principles give a strong foundation to the report for the prepared for the project or the organization level. With the completeness, I mean including all the inclusive reporting for all the relevant sources, GHG emissions, consistency. Whenever the report is made for an industry, there will be a consistent approach using the criteria, methodology, factors, reporting periods, allowing comparison trends, accuracy, ensuring the GHG emissions data are systematically calculated and reported, minimizing the uncertainty and biasness in the result. And the greatest of all in ISO 14064-1 is the transparency. This means the facilitating a clear and explicit understanding of the methodologies, data sources, and assumptions that are used in the GHG emission calculation and reporting. So whenever you are reporting with using the ISO 14064, the report is assumed and assured to be transparent with the uses of the methodology, sources of data, and assumptions in the calculation. With the relevance, it is the establishment of the boundary. What sources to be included, what to be excluded in the report gives you the can be put under the relevance principle. So next is the steps of the GHG reporting as per ISO 14064-1 and -2. Reporting through the ISO mandates you to follow a particular structure. That's why the principle of consistency is maintained in the report. There, the structure is defined in the clauses as per the ISO 14064 standard. Clause 5 says that there should be an establishment of the organization boundary and the reporting boundary. Clause 6 says how the quantification to be done. And 7 gives you an opportunity for including the initiatives for reductions, mitigation projects, set targets for the GHG emission or enhancement of GHG removals. 8, a very important clause, gives you the advantage of GHG inventory quality management that is missing in most of the other protocols and the frameworks. 9, the last and the very helping hand for the organizations. It gives you the recommended structure, how you will prepare the report if you will utilize ISO 14064-1 and -2. The ISO 14064 has defined the emissions into 6 categories. Most often, you all have seen if being in the inventory, GHG statement, GHG inventory world, then most of the emissions you will see under the scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. The definition is given by the GHG protocol. However, in ISO 14064, the emissions are being defined as direct emissions and removal, indirect emissions from imported energy, indirect GHG emission from transportation, indirect GHG emission from products used by the organization, indirect GHG emission associated with the use of products from the organization. And lastly, if anything is left, then you can put it in the category indirect GHG emissions from the other sources. So if a person is reporting from GHG protocol under scope 1 and scope 2, scope 3 emissions, then how to move to the GHG inventory? So I have done a mapping for the emissions put under the scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 of GHG protocol with that of the ISO 14064. So with this mapping, all the categories 15 which are coming falls under the scope 3 of the GHG protocol can be mapped down with the ISO 14064 6 categories. Next is there, when you are reporting and when you are an organization, there will be hundreds of sources which are indirectly affecting the GHG inventory and the GHG reporting system of the organization. It is very crucial to understand what to include and what to exclude. And whenever you are following any standard, you cannot exclude anything without a justification, because it has a principle of completeness, which refers that you have to include all the smallest to the biggest emission and to the smallest to the biggest source. So the standard gives you a helping hand with the information of how to set in criteria to select the significant indirect emissions. To select the significant indirect emissions, the organization can follow first the principles, and then after this, any of the below mentioned criteria. They can use the sector specific guidance. Like in case of oil and gas refinery, the sector specific guidance can be the API compendium. And in case of cement industry, it can be the CSI initiative by World Business Council for Sustainable Development. Or it can be, the criteria can be set for the magnitude, or it can be set for the level of influence. The level of influence says you should only include the indirect emissions to which the organization has the ability to monitor and reduce or remove it. The risk for opportunity. The risk for opportunity includes, says you to include the indirect emissions or removals that contribute to the organization's exposure to the risk or its opportunity for business. You cannot exclude the emissions which later on down the line in the monitoring period might appear to you as an opportunity for business, or are declared as the risk to the business. That risk can be financial, regulatory, supply chain, product, or customer litigation, reputational risk, any risk can be. You cannot exclude the indirect emission that is related to the company's risk. So next is outsourcing. The indirect emissions or removals resulting from the outsourced activities that are typically core business activities. You cannot exclude that. You have to include it into the emission inventory. Employee engagement, the indirect emission that could motivate the employees to reduce energy use or to show the team spirit, like energy conservation incentives, carpooling, internal carbon pricing. These are a small example of employment engagement. Mitigation measures. The another advantage of using the ISO 14064 is it gives you an opportunity to include the mitigation measures in the inventory. GHG emission reduction and under three subsets: GHG emission reduction and removal enhancement initiatives, offsets, and even you can set the targets. Offsets. If the organization reports offsets through separate projects like carbon credit projects purchased or developed by the organization, then the organization shall list that offsets separately from the GHG reduction initiatives. These, however, these offsets cannot be added or subtracted from the organization boundary. This point is crucial and should be well noted by all the organizations reporting as per ISO 14064-1. The offsets cannot be added or subtracted from the organization boundary. They have to be maintained separately. They can only be used to display the cleaner image of the organization or to give a net emissions. Targets. The organization may set targets to reduce the GHG emissions, giving information like target reference year, target completion year, type of target, category of emissions in the target, and the amount of reduction that will be achieved, and the unit expressed in accordance with the type of target. So GHG emission reduction removal enhancement initiatives, what are these? These are the reduction initiatives that can be taken by the organization or can be taken by organization under project level. Renewable energy generation, fuel switching, energy efficiency, utilization of waste heat, waste to power, waste handling and disposal, reduction of flaring fugitive emission in oil and gas, carbon capture and storage, methane nitrous oxide, methane avoidance, afforestation and reforestation, agricultural land management. Renewable energy is a very basic example of the GHG reduction initiatives. Many of the industries initially running from the grid power can substitute their power by installing the solar power plant. Fuel switching. Industry initially running on the coal or the fossil fuel can fuel switch to the alternative fuel like the biomass or the organic matter that will reduce even to the waste utilization. The industries can also develop the energy efficiency projects, which will in turn will act as an cost saving to them. Another major advantage of reporting through GHG in ISO 14064-1 is the GHG inventory quality management system tool that is provided in the report. Whenever there is a quality management system tool, the this gives the customer an assurance for the quality of the report. Including this tool, the standard emphasize on identifying and reviewing the responsibility and the authority for those who develop the GHG inventory. It also identifies the training needs of the team who is involved in the development of the GHG inventory, emphasizes on the use, maintenance, and the calibration of the measuring instrument like the pressure valves, development and the maintenance of robust data collection system, regular accuracy checks, periodic internal audits and technical reviews, and opportunity to improve management system. GHG reporting. The GHG reporting, the last clause of the ISO 14064-1. By this clause, the standard has given a helping hand to the organization to develop the reports. They have given the guidance to the organization in planning the GHG report. They have given what should be the mandatory content of the GHG report, what should be the recommended content of the GHG report, and what is the optional content for the verification report as per ISO 14064-1. Mandatory content is like description of the report organization, person, entity, documentation of the reporting boundaries, direct GHG emissions, if quantified, direct GHG removals, quantified indirect GHG emissions, separated by the categories, base year mention, explanation of any change in the base year, description of any uncertainty, a statement that GHG report has been prepared in accordance with the document, whether the report has been verified, including type of verification, level of assurance achieved, and the GWP values. So these are the some of the mandatory content that should be there in the verification report. The recommended content comes like GHG reduction initiative, offset projects, GHG emission removal disaggregated by the facilities, total quantified indirect emissions, progress towards the targets, GHG information management, and the monitoring procedure. And the optional content is the organization may report the results of the contractual instruments for the GHG attributes. The organization may report separately offsets and other type of carbon credits they purchased or generated. Further, to encourage the completeness, consistency, and readability in the report, ISO 14064-1 has provided the recommended structure of the report in form of chapters also. So in all, the ISO 14064 gives you a complete helping hand to maintain the quality of the report, to ensure the completeness, consistency in the report, and in the transparency. So after doing the all exercise, let's see what are the benefits of accounting and reporting through ISO 14064. It helps in risk management. Whenever reporting has been done, it gives a chance to the company to identify the risk associated with the climate change, emissions which are material and likely to impact the investment decision. They also give a chance to company to identify the areas for emission reduction or removals. Next, reduced GHG emissions. By reporting and accounting, the companies it holds the key to reduction opportunities since organizations can identify emissions from significant sources in their process and take targeted actions to reduce them. Promote innovation uh, in search of cleaner activities. Focusing on the largest emission sources first often leads to the greatest impact. Even the reporting can makes you energy efficient that leads to the resource efficiency and cost saving, like circular economy, lower energy consumption, waste reduction often leads to the energy efficiency improvements and cost savings. Next, target setting. Businesses may be able to set better realistic sustainable goals. Emission reduction target also provides a structured approach to minimize the environmental impact. While reporting, once target is set, it provides a clear goal and a benchmark for assessing a company GHG performance annually. Next is the facilitating performance monitoring and progress tracking. Trends, when seen in the reported emissions, can better inform the results of the mitigation efforts the company is taking, like carbon capture storage, carbon sequestration, etc. This structured approach to monitor and track progress ensures that business stay on course and make informed adjustments as needed. Next is the global alignment through ISO banner. Whenever you are reporting through an ISO, organization align with global practices, enhancing their credibility, contributing to the collective effort to combat climate change. Also, reporting as per ISO, whether 9001 or 1064, reassures consumers that the product are of high quality and hence builds the trust of consumers in the manufacturers. Next is the transparent reporting. The structure of reporting through ISO 14064 performs a key standalone function of communicating transparently to all stakeholders what environment impact as per emission the businesses by facilitating a clear and explicit understanding of the methodology, improving reputation and gaining competitive market advantage. More transparent means better reputation. When you are using ISO 14064, then the report is transparent. Hence, you have a better reputation in the market. Investors, suppliers, vendors, employees, consumers, local and national governing bodies, and all public interest organizations prefer a company that directly measures and communities its emission impacts. Future proofing the company for compliance. Reporting reporting through ISO 14064 prepares the company for the future regulation and avoid potential penalties or cost associated with the carbon pricing or associated mechanism. This reporting can also help you in gaining the labels and the ratings. Thank you. Hope, I hope that this webinar and the information provided in the webinar will definitely help you in the course of your journey to attain some target in the organization, to have a knowledge regarding the GHG reporting and inventory making. Thank you. Now I give hold to Ms. Nidhi for further process. Thank you.
So after this fruitful discussion, now we can head up for Q&A session. I request whosoever have any question, raise your hand and we will unmute you. And you can also keep your questions on the chat box. We will collate and give you answers. So we have a question from Rohit Joshi, and he's asking, do there is a reference of GHG protocol in ISO 14064 document?
No, I would like to say there is no reference of the GHG protocol in ISO 14064. ISO 14064 is a standard and GHG protocol is a separate protocol. The protocol gives you a tool and a standard gives you the structure of reporting. So there is no reference. The mapping I have done for the categorization is for the simplicity of those who have been reporting using the GHG protocol and now move on to the ISO 14064. Thank you.
And we are unmuting you. Can you unmute yourself? I request all of you to put your questions on chat box and we are taking one by one. So from Nambi Raja, he's asking, can you please explain about due diligence report? What is the purpose of the report?
The due diligence report is the purpose for initial prior to the setting of the plant, the report that is prepared by the consultant for giving all the environmental impacts, including the GHG impact, the plant will create after its implementation and operation.
Next question is how to become an accredited VVB.
To become an accredited VVB, you have to follow a set protocols. You have to get yourself registered and ISO 14065, 66, 17029, and many others. So you will get the details of your registration on the NABCB portal, and also there are different registries. When you get to accredit with them, you have to follow their protocols. The protocols are mentioned on the portals in the guideline section. The next question is from Rohit Joshi. Can you provide further insights on the point again where we cannot use offset from the organization, offset for the organization boundary? So once you are going for the code ISO 14064-1, it is clearly stated under the recommendation that the offset cannot be used addition or subtraction from the GHG inventory data. They can be marked separately. Next question is how to calculate direct and indirect emission for casting industries. In order to calculate the direct and indirect emission from the casting industry or any industry, you must understand the process and develop a boundary for it. That is the scope clause number 4 of the ISO standard. First you have to develop the organization boundary, and then you have to develop the reporting boundary. The setting up of the organization boundary will help you in determining what are the direct and indirect sources, and the reporting boundary will cover the process emissions. Next question is ISO 14064 is mandatory to become a lead auditor or assessor? So to become a lead auditor or assessor, the knowledge ISO 14064 is a knowledge standard. To become an auditor, you have to undertake the lead auditor course of ISO 14001 and be accredited and being a part of an accredited VVV. You cannot be a lead auditor standalone of ISO 14064. You have to be a part of a VVV who falls under the ISO 14065 and ISO 14066 criteria. Next question is, can you briefly explain verification and validation process on the GHG report? Sir, for this, I would request you to attend the next session of our training that will be coming up with a dedicated training for the verification and validation process of the GHG reports. Since this is a complete standard and is a complex process, so cannot be covered in a Q&A session. I request you to join the next session that will be dedicatedly for verification and validation of the GHG reports. What is the scope of audit after? Next question is from Kuntal Mukherjee. What is the scope of audit after doing ISO 14064 and 67? So if you have a knowledge of ISO 14064 and ISO 14067, then you can pursue your career as a consultant, or you can get attached with any of the VVVs and become an auditor and can work as a verifier validator for them. So next question is materiality and uncertainty. The materiality and uncertainty is a topic of ISO 14064-3 and it is a complex topic. So I request you to again